Regulators and payers often have very different goals and are looking for different things when it comes to clinical trials and endpoints. How do you take that into consideration and incorporate that into your trial design?
It's very important. I mean, more and more today we have to go beyond just regulatory approval. It's like, is the product going to be reimbursed and at least a price you consider acceptable? So, you know, I'm coming from the big pharma world where sometimes we believed we could actually get the good price and we got our teeth broken. So now it's extremely important in Europe, you know, in particular because they have very formal, you know, pricing and reimbursement process. But even in the US, I think it's becoming, you know, a hot topic to be able to demonstrate you can bring value for the patients and justify the price.
One item that they are also open to consider is the definition of responder patient. If you can select a subpopulation well, and then to define that the interest is very big for this specific population, or we have no interest in the other rest of the population, that create for regulatory and behind regulatory market access something that is a real pathway in order to discuss with agencies.
And I think we're seeing more and more there's a kind of connection between the regulators and the HTA bodies that allows you to even have joint discussions about what is required, not just for the approval, but in fact to get reimbursement. So that,
you got that? Yeah.
Well, there are sort of pilot projects, particularly in Europe, where they're trying to bring, because you can imagine Europe is all those different countries with all their different systems, and they're trying to sort of find a way to harmonize this more and more so that you've got one HTA evaluation, but also a joined up thought about what's required for approval and for reimbursement.
Yeah, so
Please go ahead.
So in our case, I think, so when you're designing a phase 2B or let's say eventually a pivotal phase 3, I think both the aspects have to be taken into consideration. FDA has a standard guidance, let's say in the case of acne. So there are certain goals that you need to achieve to get an approval from them. But when you already have existing drugs in the marketplace, you know, you need to design your trial in a manner that, you know, you get the endpoints better than them. So for payers to accept premium pricing. So I think that it has to be thought through pretty carefully. And it's not always necessary, particularly in our case, how FDA thinks, the payer thinks.
I would say between the regulators and the payers, they both try to minimize risk, but they do define risk differently. In the case of the FDA, you know, when they talk about risk, we're talking about medical risk, you know, safety, side effects, patient, you know, risk to the patients.
Right.
Whereas in the case of payers, they have their actuary tables, they have to follow all the financials, obviously. So their risk is more about minimizing uncertainty.
Yeah.
So whether the drug is going to work in what % of the population of the patients, and whether you can predict that with biomarkers or otherwise, that's the kind of products that they love, because that helps them minimize their risk in terms of future reimbursement and whether they are getting what they're paying for in the form of drugs.